That concludes the little housekeeping points. So just a very brief overview of what the webinar will contain. We're going to give you an overview of the whole project and what SERL is all about. Then we'll take a more detailed look at the data itself and what data we have. And then we're going to have a look at some of the research that's actually going on at the moment, those 3 projects there. We'll have a look at the data governance, which is a very key and important part of SERL. And then we'll have another update about what's going on currently at the moment. And then hopefully we'll have time for some questions and answers there at the end. So I'm now going to pass over to Simon Elam, who's the SERL director, who's going to begin the proper presentation. Thanks.
Everybody. So yeah, I'm Simon Elam. I'm the director of the Smart Energy Research Lab. I'm just going to, so I'll be presenting the first few slides, and then it's a bit of a tag team effort, and you'll be hearing from other members of the team as we go through various sections. And I'm just going to give a quick word of warning. We're all working from home, like many people are at the moment, and my broadband connection has been very unreliable recently. And just to demonstrate it, I got cut off just before this webinar started. So if I lose connection, then someone else will step in from the team and continue the presentation. So yeah, a quick overview of the project. So it's a 5-year project funded by UK Research and Innovation, which is essentially the funding councils, mostly for universities. And the project runs until August 2022, so we're quite a way into it. It's a consortium of 8 partners led by University College London. And the principal aim of the project is to provide an energy data resource for the UK research community. And that's a data resource that combines high resolution smart meter data linked to relevant contextual data with the aim of facilitating innovative research. An original kind of target was to go out and recruit and collect data for 10,000 GB households with their informed consent, very important. And we actually exceeded that target, and we've recruited over 13,000 households across GB. And combined with the data portal, the research portal, there's also an associated research program which will be utilising SERL data for innovative research. Next slide, please. So why do we need SERL? It's not widely known, but it's both historically and currently still very difficult for researchers to access good quality demand-side energy data in the UK. You know, where good high-resolution energy data exists, it's obvious, often with energy suppliers, or occasionally government has access to that data, but it's difficult for academic researchers to get access to that data. So we realised that smart meter data could be a bit of a game changer, particularly this access to the high-resolution half-hourly data. But however, there's substantial barriers to accessing this smart meter data still, both technical, legal, and financial. It costs a fair bit of money to get set up to access smart meter data. And that's why SERL was funded to be a central resource for the UK research community. It made much more sense to have a central resource than duplicating the effort and the cost for individual projects or universities to build their own systems. Our focus is on enabling research that's investigating energy demand or consumption in domestic buildings. That's where smart meters are. And particularly that's research that requires the use of granular household level energy data. If you were looking at nationwide system side or supply side rather, data or wanting to analyze or conduct research in that kind of arena, SERL is not particularly the resource for that. Where we are the resource is looking at granular household level domestic energy consumption. Next slide, please. So the goals of the research portal, I guess, first and foremost, to become a trusted data resource for researchers to utilize large-scale, high-resolution energy data as I said before, getting half-hourly data is a bit of a game changer. In the past, we were lucky to get even an annualized or annual total at a household level. Just having the half-hour or high resolution, even the daily energy data would be a game changer, would be a big step forward. But it's also true that you get much better benefit and value from energy data if you can link it to other contextual data. So this is data from surveys. So we have our own survey that participants complete when they sign up, which asks questions about socio-demographics and the physical characteristics of a property. We can also link to other surveys in certain circumstances, such as the English Housing Survey. We link to administrative data where it's relevant and appropriate. So EPCs, energy performance certificates, give you a lot of information about the physical characteristics of a property. And we can also link into project-specific data sets. So if a particular project was investigating heat pumps, photovoltaic, electric vehicles, and so on, they could bring those specific projects data sets in and link them to the other data sets that we collect, particularly the smart meter data. And underlying all of this is rigorous data management to ensure that fit-for-purpose data is provisioned to researchers. Next slide, please. So a little overview of the technical system. On the left, we have the home area network. So basically, we're leveraging the smart meter system that's been rolled out across the UK. It's I think more than £12 billion programme now, building the infrastructure and obviously installing the smart meters in people's homes. So on the left, the blue rectangle is the home area network. So this is the smart meters and the associated equipment, the communications hub, and you get an in-home display, and in some cases a consumer access device as well, linked into the comms hub. The comms hub then can communicate with the DCC gateway. Sorry, I've just got a delivery just at the wrong point. So the DCC gateway is the bit that sits in the middle of this national infrastructure. So it's basically a secure messaging service. So that already exists. And the stuff on the right, the green shaded rectangle, is the bit of the system that we're building. So that's our databases and our kind of secure lab environment or research portal by which researchers can actually access the data. And there's this little shaded orange bit in the middle, which is a DCC adapter, which sits in between our system and the DCC gateway. So basically, we send a message from the DCC adapter through the DCC adapter through the DCC gateway, which then sends a secure message to the comms hub, which will then collect the meter, the data from the meter, and basically send it back into our system. Next slide, please. So this is our kind of research design. So at the top, we have the data coming in from the DCC. We've got the smart meter data, as previously explained on the previous slide. And we have contextual data coming in from various different sources. We bring that into that blue shaded area in the top, which is our kind of data management layer. We link the data and manage it. In the green shaded section in the middle, that's what we call our two research functions. And I'll talk about the observatory and laboratory in a bit more detail in a second. And then finally, we've got our output layer shaded in orange at the bottom there. And that's the layer by which researchers can access either the data in a secure lab environment, which is what we call in the workshop, or if we have some static de-identified data sets, or indeed the research reports or the manuals or the code sets, which we make available alongside our observatory data set, there's a kind of a library functionality that exists with that. A lot of that at the moment is within the UK data service system, and we'll explain a little bit about how you can access that a bit later. And in the middle, we've got our two, so we've got our core observatory function, and we've got our 13,000 homes, which are representative of the GB housing stock, and broadly representative. And that's our kind of core data set. We also have a laboratory function. So the observatory, people can access that for research, for observational or longitudinal types of studies. And if you're doing an intervention trial, we don't want to contaminate our core observatory data set. So we have a laboratory function whereby the project can recruit their own participants for that project, do whatever intervention or trial it is that they want to do, collect the data, and we can then link it to the smart meter data that we will collect on behalf of that trial. And there's a couple of examples. These are two government kind of program evaluation projects, one for the Smart Energy Savings Project, which is SENSE, and there's 8 different trials within that project. And the other is the Green Homes Grant Scheme. So we're doing an evaluation of that using the laboratory function of our research design. Next slide, please. And at this point, I think I will hand over to Ellen, who will take you through the next section.
Hi there. So we wouldn't have any of our data without participant recruitment. We need consent from every household to access their data. And our original target was to recruit around 10,000 households into this core observatory panel. We wanted this to be representative of GB households, but we didn't have anybody's name. So we were cold mailing to households that we knew had a SMETS2 meter. Participants were able to sign up online or by post. And over 3 recruitment waves, we've actually managed to recruit over 13,000 participants. So our first wave was a pilot phase, August, September 2019. And we recruited over 1,700 households with about 9% response rate. And we used that to test various different methods to encourage participation, like incentives. About a year later, we did wave 2. So this was after the start of COVID, which might have been the reason for the lower response rate. And we recruited another 3,000 participants. Then finally, in this year, at the start of this year, we've recruited the final 8,000 participants, bringing up the sample to 13,000, again with a response rate of about 9%. And that's across England, Scotland, and Wales. As Simon said, there's also the laboratory function, and we've got a couple of projects that can recruit their own participants and include consent for SERL to collect their data. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of the data sets that we're providing with the SERL Observatory. So we're collecting daily and half-hourly electricity and gas data. So in theory, all participants will have electricity data, and about 70% have a SMETS2 mains gas meter. We're able to collect the data up to 12 months before they consent to take part, and that depends on when they moved into the house and when their smart meter was installed. And then that smart meter data collection is ongoing. We send a request for data every night, and we get data back every month. So we link at the household level with weather data, which we get from the ECMWF. It's reanalysis, so modeled weather data. That's an hourly and 30-kilometer resolution. And we've got around 20 variables that relate to climate. So humidity, rainfall, temperature, wind, things like that. When our participants sign up, we always send them a survey. It's optional, but pretty much everyone at least starts the survey, and most people complete the survey. You can find an example of a copy of the survey online. And this is 40 questions on the dwelling, on the household. We asked our various consortium partners what they thought the most important questions would be for understanding energy consumption. And then finally, if they have an energy performance certificate or an EPC, we link that with the rest of the data, and about half of our households have that. Next slide, please. So in terms of making that data available to researchers like yourselves, we do updates every 3 to 6 months. And first, it goes through a robust data quality assurance process. So we try to flag data quality issues. There's data cleaning processes and some derived variables added into those data sets to make it more user-friendly. So the observatory dataset is available via the UK Data Service. So if you check out study number 8666, you can find all the documentation and you can apply to access the data. The first edition of our data was released in August last year, so that was just for the Wave 1 participants. The smart meter data went up to the end of July, and that was linked to the contextual data we saw before, but it just had one weather variable. In April just gone, we increased that to the Wave 1 and 2 participants, and their smart meter data then extended to October 2020. And this was linked with the survey, the EPC, and then around 20 weather variables. And in a few months' time, we'll be doing the third edition, which will include all of the participants. So the data is accessible via a secure lab environment. We've got the UK Data Service Secure Lab and the SERL Researcher Portal, which is an AWS workspace hosted at UKDS. Next slide, please. I'm just going to give you a quick example of some of the projects that as a consortium we're looking at. Obviously, there's so many things you can do with this data. When COVID-19 started, which I think Owen's going to talk about later, we thought we should do a project on, we were interested to see how that was going to impact energy consumption. So we sent a survey to some participants to find out how that had affected them. We'll be looking at what you can do for energy performance certificates if you have their smart meter data. And then there's some projects here from some of our project partners about identifying wintertime comfort in UK homes and understanding habitual energy consumption. So now I'll pass over to Jess, who's going to talk about our first research.
Okay, thanks. So I'm just going to talk through some of the early research we've been doing and our findings so far. So Ellen's just talked about some of the key areas that SERL will be involved in researching. But the first thing we've started to look at sort of underpins the rest of this work, which is to get a thorough characterization of energy demand. So what kind of input or parameters do we need to explain energy demand? And what models can we use? And how accurate is the output of the model? We're looking at these kinds of questions first, and we're looking at the individual household level, not that aggregated demand. So we think this is important because obviously energy demand is highly variable. So for example, this is a histogram of the half-hourly gas readings from the SERL dataset. We're interested to see if we can explain that kind of wide variability over time. And to date, models have typically been able to explain around 40% of energy consumption. So this is from Bayes' work, combining the need data set with the English Housing Survey. And obviously that leaves quite a big sort of chunk unexplained. So obviously there are lots of different types of model we could use, but for this initial work, we've chosen to use a statistical regression model. These require a fair amount of data, but that's obviously fine because we've collected lots of data from lots of participants. And also these models are easy to implement and easy to interpret, which is really useful at the moment when we're just beginning to analyze the SERL data in earnest. So what we've done is to regress the daily total energy consumption against different levels of contextual data. So with just the basic contextual data, which is weather, region, day of the week, IMD quintile, and then with the basic data plus EPC, basic data plus SERL survey, and then combining all three of those data sets together. And the reason we've chosen to do 4 models like this is because of the sort of data availability within our data set. So all of the dwellings have the basic set of data, about 50% have EPC data, and well over 90% have the SERL survey. So not all of the dwellings have all the contextual data. And this bar chart is just showing the adjusted R squared for the models with different amounts of contextual data. And obviously we think this looks really promising. So the basic data explains around 35% of the energy consumption. And then the SERL survey or the EPC explain around 60 to 65%, which is great. We also think it's worth noting that the SERL survey is a self-completed 10-minute questionnaire, whereas the EPC requires quite a lot more effort to obtain. So it's nice that the models are performing similarly there. And then combining all of the contextual data together gives an R squared of over 70%. So some caveats to this. So this is early preliminary work. It's so far unpublished and it hasn't yet been peer reviewed. And this is also only for our Wave 1 and Wave 2 participants and only for the pre-lockdown period. These results are obviously also only valid for the sample we used for the analysis, which is not representative of GB households. But nonetheless, we think these are really promising early findings, which highlight the value of bringing together the different contextual data sets within SERL. So if you remember from a few slides ago, I mentioned that Bayes had explained about 40% of energy consumption in their study combining need and EHS. although it's important to note that they were using annual energy consumption, whereas we're using daily. And actually, we found very few studies doing sort of similar analysis to what we've done here, where we've got so much data for this many participants. So those models had over 600 participants. The most comparable studies have typically explained around 50% of energy consumption. And again, in terms of the participant burden, it's quite low for taking part in SERL, so just providing consent and the optional survey. So we think explaining over 70% of the energy consumption with quite a low participant burden is really promising. We also suggest that it'd be really great for future projects to harmonise with the SERL survey. Our survey is harmonised with the English Housing Survey, the Census and Understanding Society surveys where that's possible. And this kind of helps in comparing findings across projects. In terms of what we'll be doing to follow up this work, we're obviously really interested in the remaining unexplained variability, and we'll be looking to use more advanced methods to understand the impact of COVID on energy consumption, expanding our work to include the participants we recruited at the beginning of this year. And here we've used daily consumption, but we'll be looking to explore the half-hourly data and make use of the tariff information that's available to us at some point as well. So hopefully you can see there's lots to do with the data, and we'd really encourage and welcome you to come and use the SERL data and contribute to this research. And I'll hand over to Owen now, who's going to talk a bit about COVID.
Great. So yeah, as Jess was saying, we're interested in looking at COVID-19. I mean, when the first lockdown happened, we realized we were in quite a unique position to be able to kind of assess the impact of lockdown and COVID-19 on residential energy consumption, because we were collecting data, energy consumption data from before lockdown. We knew information about the households, the buildings, and then we could see, how energy consumption changed with this quite drastic change to everybody's lives. We thought this was kind of quite a unique opportunity, and particularly we wanted to essentially find out what was happening in people's homes, in people's lives. So kind of time was against us, but we kind of very rapidly developed a collaborative project with CREDS to send out a survey to our Wave 1 participants. So yeah, we got in touch with them. It was again a self-completion questionnaire, 25 questions covering quite a range of things, but we were interested in where there are changes to the household composition, where there are changes to occupancy, working from home, employment, financial status, their activities, their travel patterns. So we tried to cover quite a few bases. Yeah, so we did that. Now that data, we're in the middle of kind of analyzing. I'm going to just show you some, very brief results from that survey. But clearly what we want to do is be able to kind of combine that with the energy data and see if the changes to energy consumption correlate with some of the changes we're seeing in the survey. The data, the survey data, the COVID-19 survey data will be made part of the observatory data set that everybody can access as part of a future edition. So next slide, please. This just shows the results from one of the questions. This is kind of working from home. I think it's just to highlight that we see quite a big, substantial increase in those people kind of always working from home during lockdown. We also see an increase in people kind of not working at all. So these are, I guess, expected results. These are kind of what we were expecting, but it's good to confirm them. And also, we'll be able to kind of combine them, pair them up with the energy data itself. Next slide, please. We asked for some quite detailed information about timing of activities and when appliances were being used. I'm not going to go through these in a whole lot of detail, just some, kind of findings we've got there. Showers, people having showers later, maybe getting up later a little bit. You expect that morning ramp up to be a little bit later, and generally using appliances more during the day, in particular kind of laptops, computers, tablets. So yeah, that was just a real snapshot. That's just a couple of the questions we had. There's a lot more in there, and we, you know, clearly want to do combine that with looking at the energy demand data. So kind of watch this space, and again, we'll be making this data available to everybody. So you know, just keep track of updates to the updates in the addition to the observatory data, and you'll be able to access this too. Next slide. So just going to spend a little bit of time talking about data governance. I know it's everybody's favorite subject. However, I'm not going to go into too much detail. Just want to give a bit of a quick overview. Obviously, you've seen there's quite a lot of development that happened on the technical side of things, on the research design side of things, but actually all that needs to be accompanied with quite a lot of work done on kind of data governance, so data protection, data management, ethics, things like that. We broadly broke it down to kind of understand what the task ahead of us was in terms of kind of inbound data governance. So that's everything to do with you know, recruiting the participants, identifying them, developing the participant materials, getting the data in, and then there's the kind of outbound data governance, which is, you know, how we make the data available to you essentially. On the inbound side, I think, you know, just want to point out that, you know, it's particularly kind of interesting challenge because it's not just GDPR and kind of ethics, which, you know, most of you will be familiar with, but also the Smart Energy Code. There's an additional set of kind of obligations around smart meter data, access to smart meter data. And what we've been doing in this project is kind of the first of its kind in terms of accessing data via the DCC in this way. So there was a lot of kind of first cab off the rank, a lot of kind of learning, you know, learning opportunities, and I won't get into details on those. I think the other thing I just wanted to say, yeah, I mean, in terms of the outbound governance, I mean, we actually, you know, we could learn a lot from our partners on the project. Obviously, we're partnered with UK Data Service, with UK Data Archive. They're, you know, leaders in this type of area, so we could really benefit a lot from their experience. We also learned kind of best practice when it came to this type of thing from the Office for National Statistics. And so those of you who are familiar with kind of research accreditation under the ONS, you'll notice that, you know, the steps that we put in are you know, they'll be very familiar to you. So and on that note, let's go to the next slide. So this is just the 5 safes. These are the kind of standard things that are required for these types of, you know, researcher accredited projects where you're getting access to, you know, detailed data. I think there's the 5 safes. You know, the first 2 are the most pertinent for you guys. So safe people, we require all the researchers accessing the data to be accredited researchers under the ONS. Projects need to be safe. By that we mean that they need to get approved by the SERL Data Governance Board. So we set up an independent data governance board who make decisions on projects. It's not, you know, it's not UCL that's making those decisions. It is an independent group of people, of experts. And yeah, safe settings. So all the data, you won't be able to download the data. The data is only accessed via these secure labs, and that's because the data with the safe data bullet point there, you know, it's not anonymized data. We're making we remove the identifiers from the data, but it is called pseudo-anonymized anonymized data, and so actually you need to treat it the same way as personal data. That's why we go through all these steps to kind of, you know, protect it, and that's why, you know, you need to go through the same steps that your institutions will require to access and process personal data for, you know, research. You have to go through the same steps, although we make it a lot easier because everything is, you know, very secure and kind of thought through. Safe outputs, that just means that, you know, when you're doing your research in this secure environment, the only thing that comes out are your results. So the tables, the graphs, and they all have to go through statistical disclosure control. I think those are the main things I wanted to say. So yeah, let's go on to the next slide. I think it's back to Simon.
Yes, my video's back. So yeah, this is just a kind of a bit of a wrap up in terms of most of the presentation, just kind of a summary of where we are now. I guess the first and most important thing for us certainly is that SERL is now fully operational. We've developed the technical infrastructure, and yeah, I should really give a shout out to our partners at the UK Data Service, which is hosted at Essex University. They've been responsible for developing this technical infrastructure, and that's been an awful lot of work. As you can imagine, the smart meter system, the national smart meter system, basically is a very complex and highly secure system, and it requires an awful lot of rigor when we collect the smart meter data through that. So that's been an awful lot of work developing the data management, data ingest and management processes. Similarly, it's been an awful lot of work. So need to give some credit to our partners at Essex University for that. We're now collecting and managing data from over 13,000 households. The observatory data set is available to researchers via a secure lab environment. We've established our independent data governance board, as Owen was just telling about. And our research program is underway. So we've got 8 projects commissioned from that. That's the SERL funded research program. And as Jess was mentioning in her slides, I think what's really important for us is that this initial analysis of the SERL observatory data set suggests that it is a valuable evidence space for research relating to domestic energy consumption. So there's a lot of work still to be done on that, but that is very, very pleasing. And the next steps, really just ongoing development of the research portal and other aspects of the technical system, and similarly ongoing research with our research program. And I guess kind of perhaps most important for some of the participants or attendees of this webinar, our data governance board is conducting ongoing review of projects that apply to access SERL data. We've got several projects currently in the review pipeline, with many more that we know of that are kind of coming down the track to follow. And so, we want this resource that we've developed to be used as widely as possible by the UK research community. So, additional research project applications are very much encouraged. So if you can find a use, or you think there's a use for SERL with your research, then please submit a project application. I think James is going to go on to the next slide, and he's got some contact information there for where you can get a bit more information, either from our website or by email or anything else.
Yes, so just following on from that, yes, there's obviously various ways that you can follow up your interest in SERL with us. So as Simon said, we've got the email address there, info@serl.ac.uk. We have our website, which has got a lot more information on it. And particularly if you want to go to serl.ac.uk/researchers, there's detailed instructions of how to actually practically go about accessing the data. We have a roughly quarterly newsletter that goes out. You can sign up to if you're interested in having news updates from us. By the way, this information will be sent out on an email tomorrow as well, so you won't get all these links to that too. And if you can go to the UKDS data catalogue, you can read a lot more detailed documentation about the actual nature of the data on there. That's number 8666 at the UK Data Service. I believe the next slide is Q&A. Okay, so we've got a number of questions open there. So using the voting system, I guess we can start from the top there on the questions. And
is Ellen going to compare the questions, or are you doing it?
Beg your pardon, Ellen. Sorry, do you want to take over?
Sure. Hi. So maybe we'll start with the question from David Jenkins. Owen, you indicated you might want to answer this question, or do you want to nominate someone else to answer it?
Yeah, I nominate you, Ellen. No, it's fine. I'll
Okay.
do it. How do you deal with pseudonymized data and accidentally de-anonymizing? So this is a really good question. I mean, the point is that we give you access to the dwelling level data within the secure environment. So, it is possible for you to do some sort of kind of identification hacking, I suppose, if you want, within the secure environment. Now, part of the point about becoming an accredited researcher is that you agree not to do these things, right? You're not supposed to do these things. You get access to the data under specific kind of rules about how you'll kind of work with it, but it's within this secure environment, right? And that but then the point is that the data cannot be taken out. It's only outputs that essentially are anonymized that can be taken out. So you get access to the data, you do your analysis, and you produce these outputs that are going to pass statistical disclosure control. And so by that, for example, you can't have anything that is identifiable within that. So if you have a table with results in it, every cell of that table has to correspond to at least 10n, right? So there's no way of de-identifying or of identifying any individual from the results. So I think that covers that question.
So we've got another question here. What is the resolution of locational data for households?
So this is another good question, and it depends. So you write your project application, you say what you want to access for your research and why, and you have to make a case for why you need a particular geographical resolution. So I think kind of as standard, we make LSOA level available. Please correct me if I'm wrong, anybody. You can make the case for requiring a postcode district level or something like that, but you have to make that case why you need that, why more aggregated data isn't enough for what you want to do, and that gets assessed by the data governance board.
And just to jump in on as a kind of addition to that, that's how we make the data available to researchers in the standards I'm saying. But we hold the data in our back-end system at the individual address level. Yeah. Which is how we're able to link to survey data and EBC data and things like that.
Perhaps, Simon, you'd like to take the question, can companies engage or only universities?
Okay, so primarily we have designed the portal to be for academic researchers, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Partly because that's we're funded by a research council, and they fund universities or higher education institutions. And the second main reason is that when we went out to try and recruit households, we know that there are a lot more willing. So we're basically relying on the altruism of households, which is just households across the UK, to allow us to collect their smart meter data and the other survey data they give us. So we know that they are much more nervous about commercial organisations getting access to their data and using it for commercial purposes, even if things like fairly harmless in a lot of ways, direct marketing, but households certainly find that quite annoying. So we had to try and kind of boost our response rate. And one of the ways we do that was to say that commercial organisations do not get access to your data. That's our deal with, and that's on the consent form. However, so a commercial organisation or even a non-UK academic researcher cannot get access to the high resolution data. So that the data that's available in the secure lab. That's only available to essentially to UK academic researchers. But commercial organisations can partner with a UK academic institution, academic researcher, and to conduct research. They can't get access to the granular data, but they can get access to the results, the aggregated results that have gone through statistical disclosure control and are allowed as an output. And so you can use SERL as a commercial organisation in that way if you partner with an academic institution and your project is approved by the Data Governance Board. There's a public benefit test to that, but it is still possible to do. And we wanted to have that mechanism to allow that while making sure that we had the protection on the data that we have, that's our kind of contract, if you like, with our participants.
So I've got a question. Say you had a PhD student working on load forecasting, would that be likely to be approved by the SERL Data Governance Board? I'm going to throw that to Simon.
It depends on the project. That it is possible for PhD students to get access to use SERL for research. So as long as, it's a little bit more complicated than a kind of staff member at a university. I think, as I remember correctly, the supervisor would also need to become an accredited researcher as well as the PhD student, and the project would have to be approved. But in theory, that's possible.
So I could take the next one. Would it be possible to provide a properly anonymized sandbox data set that was still representative, but could be used by a wider range kind of quick look projects, for example, MSc projects? So providing an anonymized data set is something we'd like to do, but it's not something that we're planning to do anytime soon, I think is the short answer to that. Perhaps, Simon, you'd like to add anything?
Yeah, just because it's really difficult. It's really difficult to provide a properly anonymized data set of high resolution data alongside the useful contextual data. Even just the smart meter data itself, it's really, there's some very sophisticated re-identification techniques these days. So it's something that we're struggling with to find a way that we can say this is robustly de-identified and it's not going to get re-identified. So we certainly have the ambition to do it, but it's difficult and it may take us a while before we get there.
So we have EPC data. Does this mean that the data shown in the EPC certificate or the underlying data used to generate the certificate? It's the data that's in the EPC certificate, so it's not the underlying data, although that is something we're trying to get and we would like to get.
It's some of the underlying data though. It's not just the rating, I guess, just to make it clear, It's not just the output rating. We have some of the underlying data, but not the complete set. And that's just what's made available essentially by MHCLG with the EPC data set.
It's about 80 variables, I think, and you can see them all in the documentation on the UKDS study number 8666. Do we have any way of tracking significant changes to the building or building use? For example, changes to the heating system, addition of renewables, or changes to the number of occupants? Simon?
The short answer is not really, or no, not really. So while we collect the smart meter data longitudinally in a kind of ongoing fashion, actually every night we do a kind of bulk download of the smart meter data. We get that kind of survey data, which tells about the household and so forth, and the physical characteristics as a one-off. Either the EPC is when the EPC was conducted, or a SERL survey is something that participants complete when they initially sign up. So it's just a one-off survey. We are considering whether we might, we have the facility within our consent to ask a follow-up survey of our participants on an annual basis. But in terms of the cost to us and the burden to them, we probably will not do that on an annual basis, but we may do another one-off annual survey, which would then, we'd be able to compare what they said, you know, initially to the follow-up, and do any comparison of changes in household size, or, you know, have they got a new boiler or whatever else. So we may consider doing that, but as I said, the short answer is not really.
Thanks, Simon. So someone's asking what the procedures and eligibility criteria are to access the data. So I should point out there's a webinar, and one of the questions that was answered links to the webinar that goes through some of the procedures and the eligibility criteria. Does anyone want to add anything onto that?
No, other than also look at the SERL website, the researchers page in the SERL website. That gives more information about the how you can access and the eligibility for accessing SERL.
Helen has asked, can data be disaggregated at the regional level? For example, if I was only interested in households in the northeast of England, I meant to click type answer to this one, but yes, you can. You can filter on regions, and you can filter to LSOA. So yeah, you can definitely just filter on whichever areas you'd like. Simon, you'd like to answer the question live. Do we have any way of tracking? Oh, you've answered that one. One for Owen or Jess, I think. What EPC attributes did you use in the regression modeling? So wondering how accurate you found the EPC data. Did you do a comparison of the SERL survey responses against the EPC attributes?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good question. I think it's just to point out that we're kind of at the beginning of this piece of analysis. At the moment, we're more focused on the kind of contextual data sets as a whole and how much they explain the variability. So at the moment, that's the kind of the primary interest. And the kind of then secondary underneath it is, okay, well, within those data sets, what are the variables that are most interesting and most significant? But yeah, you know, it's fair to say we haven't done a direct comparison between EPC and SERL survey variables, but there are some that we could do. So we ask things like, we ask for number of rooms, number of bedrooms. We ask our participants, and that's a variable, or at least number of rooms. Number of heated rooms is in the EPC data set. There's also floor area. You know, we ask some information about heating system, you know, what type of heating system they have, and that's obviously also in the EPC. So there is some redundancy in there, which is, you know, done on purpose, because we knew that not all dwellings have EPCs, and not all EPCs can be, you know, trusted 100%, which links to some a point made by Rob Lilliard there. But yeah, I think that's what we're going to say. We're hoping to publish a paper on this in the next, on that piece of analysis in the next, well, in the next few months, ideally.
So finally, we've got, oh, sorry, Simon.
I was just going to say, if anyone else has a question that they want to type, because we've only got one question remaining here. There was one by
Andrew. Andrew had a good question that I wanted to, I thought would merited being discussed live. So Andrew says, you know, how are you able to determine that your participants are representative of UK housing? So this is like a really, really good question, and it's difficult. Now, Ellen said that, you know, we're publishing a paper on recruitment methodology. This says a lot about that, but you know, you're right. It's one of the goals of this sample is that we want it to be representative of GB. I think, you know, to point out that we start using, as far as we can, these kind of gold standard methods for sampling. So we take a stratified random sample of addresses, of GB addresses. So that's like a really good starting point, obviously. But then, you know, we have to cut that down, you know, which of those have got SMETS 2 meters. So, you know, there's a question of, are SMETS 2, is the SMETS 2 population representative of the general population? I think the answer is, well, we don't know. We don't have that information to be able to say that, but, you know, that's something that you have to consider. The SERL observatory, if it's going to be representative of anything, it's going to be representative of the SMETSU population. And then there's, response bias. So, some households are more likely to respond than others. So it's non-trivial to be able to go from a sample level estimate, which is essentially what we're doing at the moment, to try to then extrapolate up to a more generalized result of the population. It's something that we want to do. We want to provide weightings that you can use so that you know that, okay, this observation from this household is representative of X number of households, and the next one on is representative of slightly more or slightly less. That's something that we want to do, but it's not easy to do that.
I might just add to that part of the benefit of doing 3 waves of recruitment was when we got response bias in certain regions or certain IMD quintiles, we were able to then oversample to try and rebalance the sample. So we were trying to be representative of the IMD quintiles and the regions. The benefit of having some of our survey questions harmonized with things like the census and the English housing survey is that we can compare our sample to these national estimates. Obviously, the census is quite out of date. You've got issues with every survey, but we're going to be reporting on how our sample compares with other samples from other national surveys.
Okay, there's a question from Philip Lester about anonymisation, or perhaps a comment. So yes, that will work for need. So the one solution is to band some of the parameters together as done by need, as well as, of course, to drop some parameters or some variables. Yes, that will work to some extent. The problem we have with the higher resolution smart meter data, so certainly half hourly, but even daily, so is that data in itself, if you've got some clever re-identification algorithms and access to some energy data from another source, is you can use that in itself to re-identify. With need, it's much more difficult because at the individual household level, it's just an annual consumption number, and that's very difficult to use as a re-identification parameter. But if you have daily or half-hourly meter at the individual level, even if you don't include in dress, that in itself can be used for re-identification. So that's one of the reasons that it's very difficult for us, and while we're still going through this process of trying to work out how we can hopefully create a truly de-identified data set that can't be re-identified. Okay, that looks like it's the end of the questions. So unless another question gets typed in and popped up very quickly, I think we'll wrap up, and we're just about 3 minutes from the end anyway, so that seems like a good point. James, do you want to go run through the kind of final acknowledgements? And also, I believe that the recordings and possibly the slides, the recording of the webinar and slides will be made available. Do you want to just mention how that's the case?
Yes, sure. So yes, we'll put the slides and the video of the webinar on the website, serl.ac.uk in the next couple of days, and so we'll make those available. And again, you've got the email, which you'll get in another email from us if you want to get in touch. So yes, as you can see, we've got the acknowledgements there just to acknowledge that all the work is funded by the EPSRC, and that SERL is a consortium of 8 organisations, and there's 30 plus members of it have all contributed to the work. I think if we go on to the next slide, we can, oh, not anymore, never mind. It had the logos of all the different partners, but you can find out about all that on their website. So I think unless any of my colleagues have got any further comments or anything, we can, it just remains to say thanks very much for coming along and for your questions and discussions, and thanks to our presenters for their presentations, and we hope to be hearing from you in the near future about how you'd like to get involved in using the SERL data. So if nobody else has got any comments, I think we can say goodbye now. So thanks very much, everyone. See you later.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.